Welcome to the Aging Well podcast, where we explore the science, stories, and strategies that help us live longer, healthier, and more purposeful lives. Among the most critical pillars of aging well are nutrition, metabolic health, and the prevention of chronic diseases, areas where today's guest has dedicated his career to making a real difference. Lewis Bertus is a physician assistant with a deep passion for empowering individuals to take control of their health, particularly in the area of type 2 diabetes and prediabetes. Since 2017, he has focused on the profound impact of lifestyle choices using evidence-based research to guide patients toward reversing their disease and, in many cases, eliminating the need for medication altogether. His work emphasizes vitality, energy, and long-term independence, outcomes that align beautifully with our passion here on the Aging Well podcast. Today, Lewis will share his insights into some of the misunderstood factors influencing insulin resistance, the true impact of diet choices, and why critical information about diabetes reversal remains largely absent from mainstream health discussions. We'll also hear about a powerful personal journey that makes his message even more compelling. His conversation promises to illuminate not just how we manage diabetes, but how we can reclaim our health in ways that ripple across every aspect of aging well. Lewis, welcome to the Aging Well podcast. To start, let's just have you tell us a little bit about yourself and what drew you initially to focus so deeply on diabetes management, particularly reversal, and how has your passion evolved over your career?
Great, well-worded question. I was always into health. Even from a young age, I knew I was going to go towards a healthcare field. But what drew me to diabetes specifically was my wife having diabetes, and more specifically seeing that the traditional dietary advice, the first line, second line, third line medications, all really failing to give her results or relief from her diabetes, just kept getting worse. So that kind of forced me to lean into the, what does nature say? What are some natural ways to reverse the root cause of this disease, which is something I've always been firmly a believer in. There's always a cause, right? And very often, unfortunately, we focus on the symptoms, and maybe that's the problem. So we figured it out. In 6 weeks, she was off medicine.
Wow, 6 weeks. That's incredible.
6 weeks. It was 8 years of diabetes. 8 years. So those who've been struggling with diabetes a long time, a lot of times they think that this can't be reversed. But even as of today, that was about, I guess, we've been in business about 2 years ago. So yeah, going more than 2 years. Still medication free, eats fruits for breakfast, doesn't inject, used to be insulin dependent, doesn't need any medication, insulin, nothing, completely diet controlled.
Wow. And you've spoken about how your formal education didn't really fully prepare you for what you later discovered about insulin resistance. So what were some of the biggest gaps you noticed when it came to the role of saturated fat and just nutrition in general?
Yeah. So I think the problem again is really symptom focused. In medical school and PA school, we learn the symptoms of a disease. We're very good at diagnosing what's wrong with you, and then finding the right pill to address the symptom. So high blood pressure, getting the blood pressure down. High blood sugar level, getting the blood sugar down. High cholesterol level, you decreasing the cholesterol levels. But we don't ask ourselves why. Why is blood pressure high? Why is the cholesterol high? Why is the blood sugar high? Because when you find out why, then you can solve the real problem, take care of that. So, within the time I started researching outside of PA school, you have to sift through the overwhelming information on carb-centered, approach that carbs are the problem, that carbs are what causes diabetes, which makes sense on the surface, but there's actually studies that date back for a very long time. I mean, we're talking maybe close to 100 years that shows that it's actually saturated fat that causes your body to become resistant to insulin. And if that goes on long enough, eventually, the pancreas starts to shut down. It's not producing a sufficient amount of insulin to deal with the carb intake, and now you become a diabetic. So it's so amazing how fast, once you start solving the root problem, getting rid of or limiting, I should say, the saturated fat in the diet, insulin becomes sensitive again. Now it responds to the incoming carbs from your food, in a normal way. And now, you could, again, fruits for breakfast. You could go back to a diet that's normal without blood sugar spikes.
Yeah, it's been interesting. It's just the path in kind of metabolic health and nutrition of late. It's been kind of this controversy between carbs and fats and not really looking at what's the overall picture. And so, the research, as you indicated, has shown that metabolic health is just simply crucial for aging well. Could you explain how insulin resistance fits into the broader picture of aging, vitality, and really just disease protection and prevention in general?
Yep. So that's true. Whether you're diabetic or not, we all should know how insulin resistance works and plays a role in our health. The main thing, is that when you have your body, I guess the main thing is to understand the importance of what insulin does. So insulin is a hormone that's responsible for energy storage, right? It determines, where and how energy is stored. Now imagine how important that is, right? Energy is what's keeping us alive, right? So we are alive because of energy storage, right? And so when we start to develop resistance to insulin, right, then we start to store fat, right, in excess amounts, because the body's trying to overcome the problem by creating too much insulin. That insulin now is storing too much fat. That fat now stores toxins in the body. Inflammation, it starts to occur all over the body. I like an analogy actually I heard recently that I've been sharing with people is that, we know what inflammation is, but best explanation for inflammation to me is like, imagine a construction crew at work in your house 24 hours, 7 days a week, breaking down walls, destroying things that don't need to be destroyed. We need a construction crew occasionally when you need to fix a problem, but inflammation is a construction crew that's never going away. And unfortunately, when you have high levels of insulin resistance, you have a construction crew, in your body, inflammation causing damage to tissues, to cells, cellular regeneration and health, longevity is impacted. Because the cells can't, function properly. So we need to address insulin resistance, whether or not we're diabetics. We need to know what causes it and how to prevent it.
And low carb and ketogenic diets are often touted as solutions to diabetes management. Mm-hmm. What are some of the drawbacks or limitations you've observed to these approaches?
And I guess I want to acknowledge first the good things, right? If you have when your sugars are high and you stop eating carbs, right? You stop the carb intake, the sugars come down. So for a long time, that's what my wife did. She was actually on a keto diet. She was on a very low carb diet. And that was for, I would say maybe over a year. I can't remember how long. It was the only thing that kept her sugars under control. Because we didn't understand the fat to insulin connection. So going low carb keto, was the only thing that kept her sugars under control, kept blood sugars from spiking. She did experience the weight loss that people, rave about. But unfortunately, other things happened. Her cholesterol level started, her liver enzymes started to elevate. So you're solving one problem, the symptom, but you may be causing another, right? And studies show that low carb diets high in fat and protein and low in carbs, the carbs we need, especially the complex carbs, are basically tied to mortality, right? Heart disease, and worsening diabetes in the long run. So we're solving a problem for the short term, but we're causing problems in the long term. And we could talk about the fact that, when you look at the people who are living longest in this world, the blue zones, they are not limiting carbs. They're rich in carbs, right? Carb rich, carb centered. Those are the societies that have the longest lifespan.
And it's really much more about the quality of the carbs, the timing of the carbs, and that stuff.
Absolutely.
And you often address the concept of sugar addiction. How powerful is sugar's grip over us, and both physiologically and psychologically? And what are some of the biggest challenges that your patients face in overcoming it?
Yeah, of course, it's huge, right? It's really the real problem. I should say one of the main problems, because, we want to acknowledge the root cause being fat, getting rid of the animal food-based foods that are rich in saturated fat, increasing plant-based foods. But sugar still is a problem, right? We can't give sugar a pass because it's easy to overeat calories when you're indulging in, refined carbohydrate sugar. And unfortunately, it's also very hard to stop. overindulging because how it affects the brain. There's a dopamine release spikes that makes you feel good, similar to drug addictions, right? The same part of our body that's stimulated by drugs is stimulated by these sugars. And these food companies, of course, they know how to make good lifelong customers, right? It's the sugar that's added to the product that keeps you buying it. And so, yeah, that's for all my clients. I haven't met a client that sugar wasn't a big problem, but it really comes down to knowing your reason why. Why do you want to, reach the health goal of reversing diabetes, if that's what it is, or living healthier. Even, people say, I want to live longer. Ask them why. Why do you want to live longer? The people that do well at overcoming addictions, they have a strong reason why, right? Beyond the superficial, beyond the external, it's something internal. Maybe it could be something simple like I need to prove something to myself. For me, that was what it was for me. I need to prove that I can do it, right? The character development that comes from knowing that I accomplished this, that I don't have this chain holding me anymore, that keeps you going past. So finding a strong motivation. For a lot of people, it's their kids, their grandkids, the hope of seeing them in a healthy age. The hope of living over the fear of dying, for sure. But there is also the fear of dying. People who get to the point where they're on dialysis or the limbs amputated, unfortunately, that's when they usually are willing to pay for a coach, right? And for you, if that's you, it's not too late, but a lot of times it's because they've gotten to the point where it's no longer convenient enough to continue the sugar craving addiction. So that's where they finally find success.
And one thing we talk a lot about on this podcast, and I talk about in my classes too that I teach, is that we also have to go that next step of asking the question, what's our why not? Because a lot of times we can figure out that why, especially as we get to that point where, our health is so bad that it's life-threatening. But then you start looking at, okay, how are our communities structured? What food is available? And all these different societal things that, and we were talking before we got online here that, about the SPIES model that we talk about on the podcast a lot. And that, that spiritual piece, or that, the piece of the community, and how are we looking at how we developing our local communities so that people can have access to good, healthy behaviors so that they can manage their diabetes because they want to and because they have the ability to.
That's huge and if you think it's really easy to talk about the problem, what the problem is, but the solution, right? The positives that come from the solution are so much more powerful and motivating, to think that you have the power every time you go to the grocery store to affect someone else's decision, not just yourself, but someone else. I mean, so many times, people see what I'm buying in the grocery store, and we have conversations about eating, so there's that level, motivating others, motivating family members, the family people around us, right? When they see us eating better, making healthier choices, now they're going to be motivated to do the same. A lot of us are living with generational curses when it comes to health problems, right? Family diabetes, high blood pressure, obesity runs in the family. But I always encourage my patients and clients that you have the power to end generational curses. Diabetes runs in your family. That you have the power to end that, and you could be the one that stops that, and so that the future generations that come after you no longer are diabetic, right? I mean, we have the power to change our family, our community, this world. It starts with you. I think that's something we need to focus on.
Yeah, it's a really good point. And one thing that you discuss when you discuss diabetes reversal is, that it's often kind of considered in the abstract, but you talked about your wife's experience really kind of bringing it to life in a very personal way. Yeah. Did you mind sharing a little bit more of her story and what you learned from that journey?
Yeah, for sure. So it was actually interesting because when she was diagnosed with diabetes, she was had already been diagnosed while I was in PA school. But as I was learning about diabetes, I'm going home like, man, this is horrible. We got to take care of this, man. You're going to die. I'm going to, because one thing about, of course, our doctors that we're in medical school and PA schools, they definitely do emphasize the dangers of high blood sugars. I mean, it's toxic. It's destroying every tissue in your body, head to toe. So, it was a big transition because before I knew anything about diabetes, I was like oblivious. I didn't know anything, and I was like, "Why are you drinking so much water? You need to stop drinking water, and then you won't pee so much, right?" So I went from nonchalant, to really really understanding the dangers of this, and then emphasizing the drugs and the drugs were she was really interesting because for her, and I've had a lot of patients like this too. She had every side effect every time, and you know how there's a list of side effects that comes with drugs. Like she would have at least one or two of every time that she would start a drug, she'd get the side effects that come with it. Whether it be joint pain or GI symptoms or headaches or whatever. Fatigue. She would get all the symptoms for these drugs. So she was constantly having to change drugs. So it was really hard for her to maintain consistency with drugs. But I would still encourage her that, there's a lot of times you stick with it, the side effects are going to get better. But the problem was I wasn't, even when she did stick with the drugs, right, and the dietary recommendations of limiting carbs, the sugar stayed high, her vision started to still decrease, she still experienced all the symptoms of hyperglycemia. And I'm like, well, I don't know, because it's one thing as a provider to hear your patient tell you, well, taking the medications and I'm eating healthy and their sugars are high. What's the first thing you're thinking? No, you're not. Right, because right. And that I have to be honest. Most providers like me, when their sugars are elevated, it's like a scorecard that you're not really playing the game right. You're not doing it right. But here I am going home, seeing my wife doing everything right, and it's still not working. So you can imagine. I'm thinking like, well, if it's not working for her, then maybe it's not working for my patient. Maybe my patients aren't lying. Maybe they are trying. Maybe it's just not working. So that really what's pushed me to say, and what helped too, I should say, Jeff, is that I had a background that really was that understood the power of plant-based diets. Because being a Seventh-day Adventist, so I actually was in a Seventh-day Adventist college. My bachelor's was in theology, and the Seventh-day Adventist church, I was always entrenched in that church. And anyone who knows anything about Seventh-day Adventism, they're very pro plant-based. Right, they talk about holistic healing and the power of being plant-based to heal the body as well as the mind and spirit. And so I knew there was something to that. I was something to that. And so, but the problem was even being plant-based, it wasn't really working. Right? I'm like, but she's plant-based. We're vegetarian. We're vegan. Even when we were vegan, it still wasn't working, Jeff. And you can imagine, like, man, if you're vegan and you're still not working, you just quit. Right? I mean, what's healthier than being a vegan? But it was, again, understanding the fat connection. Because even on a vegan diet, you could have too much fat, in a diet. And the ideal fat percentage, going into more technical, the ideal fat percentage that we learned through the scientific studies and research that's out there is to get the diet to no more than 15%. Ideally 10, but from 10 to 15% of your total calories should be from fat. Once you do that, for all my clients, once they do that, their sugars start to get normal. No matter how long they've been diabetic. And
that just seems to be kind of so counter to what we're hearing more and more in influencers and all that other kind of stuff, and indicating carnivore diet, ketogenic diet.
Yeah.
And,
works good in the short term, but not long term. Yeah, not good idea in long term.
So one of the themes that frequently comes up in the conversations about health is the gap between evidence-based practice and what is commonly promoted in the mainstream circles, as we've kind of been talking about. Mm-hmm. What do you think information about diabetes reversal really remains, or why do you think that the information about diabetes reversal seems so underrepresented?
I would say the main reason is food industry bias. There's a lot of food industry influence when it comes to what's promoted in the public. Because think about it, it's a multi-billion-dollar industry. And if any kind of messaging says stop eating their product, they're going to stop that. They have a vested interest in making sure it doesn't get to the public. So whenever there's a study that might say decrease milk consumption, decrease dairy, right? Decrease milk consumption, they might fund a study that shows the benefits of milk, right? And push that in the public. So now you're getting competed, and the way they operate is actually just the same way the tobacco industry operates. Instill doubt. We don't need to refute the science, just make people doubt the science. So for every maybe article you see that, decreased saturated fat, that meat is tied to cancer, put out some kind of obscured study, and usually it's an industry funded study that shows the benefits of eating meat, right? On the next website. So, not knowing that study is probably really obscured in a lot of these studies. When you look at them, how many people, we read headlines, but how many of us are really reading the studies to see, is this study legitimate, right? What's the sample size? What was the endpoint, right? Was there control? Who funded it is the biggest one. So I would say that is first, but also because think about it, man, it's hard to change your diet. People say it's easier to change your religion than to change your diet, so eating, the idea of, high fat, high protein is appealing, right? And especially, for years we've been having this idea that protein is a health food, right? It's like isolated nutrient that we're deficient in. So there's a lot of misinformation, because, let's face it, we like what we like and we don't want to change that, right? So I think we need to check ourselves first, say, am I looking at this information from an unbiased point of view, right? As objectively as possible. But then the information itself is information objective that I'm receiving. Read the studies, right? See, and then compare them to other studies. And if you do that, then you're going to find the truth for yourself. But unfortunately, as far as the public goes, we're going to continue getting misinformation for many years. But I'm hopeful though, because again, just like the tobacco industry, right? With time, the people will see the truth, right? They'll start demanding the truth, right? Because we're hurting so much from the misinformation, and then things will change, but things will change slowly.
Yeah, I think we need to really develop our science literacy a bit more in this country. We're so dependent on social media and even podcasts like this. If anybody watches this podcast and they don't qualify or follow up on the information we're providing here, then you're not getting the right information. And we try and stress that a lot on here, that you read an article, it's in a reputable news outlet or whatever, but go to the study that's linked there. And if it's not linked there, you got to question, where's this information coming from?
Look it up. Don't take anyone's word for it. I think there's a lot of influencer bias too. Like, we follow certain people, and what if say they said it must be true, right? But no, we need to be independent thinkers. Right? I think that's something we do value. But how much of us do it when it comes to our health? Like what's more important than your health, right? I think we'll research so many things, like the best outfit to buy, the best place to go on vacation, the best place to spend your money. Take that same energy and apply it to your health, because that vacation, that money you're buying, those clothes, they can't add one day to your life, right?
Right.
But every single day you have a decision to make that will either extend your life or cut it short. Shouldn't you be researching what to put in your mouth, right? I don't know.
And so how do we go about empowering your patients and even, the people on this podcast? How do I get them to really start looking at taking control of their lives and making the necessary behavioral changes?
Yeah. So I think keep it simple first, right? One thing that I think is important is see what you can change right now. Like, what's one thing I could do better today, right? And make a list, right? And write down. I think it's important to write down the changes you're intending to make, because you're more likely to hold it accountable. How many of us say, I'm going to go more walk, I'm going to exercise more, I'm going to drink more water, right? And that was even last year's resolution. But write it down and put it somewhere visible, right? And then challenge yourself and ask. And I think there should be a period of accountability, maybe once a day, a few times a day, where you check, and am I keeping track with that commitment? I don't care what it is, if it's just walking an extra 15 minutes, right? Just make small changes now, right? What can I do right now? Because it's a snowball effect. What you do well now is going to say, hey, I'm drinking more water, right? Maybe now I could add something more specific, like maybe 6 servings of fruits a day, right? And then you keep your fruits in a bowl on the kitchen counter, so you make sure that you meet your daily quota. So being intentional, being practical, is my first advice usually. And then more specifically, I think if we're looking at parameters as far as eating, what does a healthy diet look like? Because a lot of people think that just means eating steamed broccoli all day. Hey, I just got to eat broccoli and spinach, right? Is it? That's it, right? Asparagus, right? But there's I always have to check myself how many. There's 4 main food groups, right? So there's fruits that I want you to increase in your diet. Just start eating more fruit. Obviously vegetables, right? Vegetables we know are healthy for you. No one argues with vegetables. So the green leafy vegetables and even the starchy ones, okay? The next group I would say we need to increase in our diet is legumes, beans, man, lentils, chickpeas, kidney beans, legumes. That is for any outcome, whether it be cholesterol, weight, blood sugar, bombshell. Legumes, whole grains, right? So we're staying away. And when I say whole grains, that's intact whole grains, the ones that are not stripped of their fiber. So you're doing brown rice instead of white rice, quinoa. Those whole grains. Also, maybe you're doing whole grain pasta, whole wheat pasta instead of traditional pasta. So fruits, vegetables, legumes, whole grains, and then the last. Okay, so if there's five, I would say add nuts and seeds to your diet. So that's what a healthy diet looks like. What did I not include in those five?
No meat, no dairy.
Yeah. Where's the meat? Where's the meat? How can I live without meat? So if you can't live without meat, then make sure it's a small portion, not the majority of your plate. Your plate should be colorful, right? I would say the best advice I hear is 80% of your plate, try to make it plant-based. The other 20%, if you had to put some cheese and meat in there, fine. If that's the best you can do, right? Start small and grow gradually into that, right? So it's not like an all or nothing thing. For a lot of our diet, now when I talk about diabetes reversal, Jeff, don't get me wrong. If you're diabetic, you're trying to reverse it. Like, if you just want to manage your blood sugar levels, fine. But if you really want, most people who come to me and says, Bertus, I want to know how to reverse this thing. I want to get rid of it. I'm going to be real with you. Your body's in a disease state. Half measures are not going to work. You might as well go all the way, right? Because that is in itself is going to be rewarding when you go back to your doctor. And then I love this when the doctor says, "What did you do? Your A1C is normal." So you're taking, the medications are working. No, I tossed those medications months ago. I'm not, I'm just so, and then they want to get my information because they know this is impossible. You're not diabetic anymore. I mean, think of the joy of that. I don't know. There's no food product better than the joy of knowing you're going to live longer, you're feeling better, and you're disease free, man.
So I don't know what kind of percentages we'd put on in terms of the success and how everything fits together, but it would seem like at least 50% or more of the success in reversing diabetes is going to be just getting to those 5 basic plant-based areas.
Say, definitely greater than 50%.
Picking from those.
Yeah, definitely greater than 50%.
And then maybe refining that a little bit more. As you refine that, okay, just, eat this kind, eat more fruits. Well, which fruits do you tend to recommend? Say, okay, because, there's a lot of crappy fruits out there, we could just eat,
bananas all day.
Bananas all day, yeah, right.
That's the first thing as Americans, we're going to, eat fruit. Okay, I'll eat bananas and apples. That's the main thing.
Right.
But not to say this bad. I do, my diabetics are eating bananas. The ones who are in the program, they still eat bananas. They'll throw bananas in smoothies. But there are definitely fruits that are lower in the glycemic level. So I think especially, there's 2 things. How long have you been diabetic, right? So if a person has been diabetic, 8+ years, they have to be a little more careful, especially with their sugars are going to take a little longer to get normal, right? So you want to stick with low glycemic fruits for sure. Berries are good. Berries actually have a starch blocking effect. So all your blueberries, strawberries, get berries in your food in your day early on are going to be better. But check out, you can look online. There's plenty of websites that show you a glycemic index of foods, and you want to stick with the ones that are lower in the glycemic level. That'll give you a shopping idea of which fruits that you should increase in your diet. Some are very high. It doesn't mean, again, this is different, Jeff. This is different. So if let's say you're experiencing blood sugar spikes while increasing your fruit and your vegetables, beans, intact whole grains, you're eating plant-based essentially, then you have to ask yourself, okay, well, am I keeping my fat percentage low enough, right? That's where it comes a little trickier for diabetics. Again, the fat percentage has to be measured. And if you're keeping it 10 to 15%, what you're going to find within days or weeks, some people it takes longer, but I haven't seen it longer than 6 weeks. What happens is your blood sugars your body becomes more tolerant of even the high glycemic fruit. So first question is not the type of fruit. First question is always going to be how much fat on your diet. Are you still cooking with oil? Because that's definitely going to set you over the 15%. Even if it's healthier oils like olive oil. Unfortunately, if you really want to get to 15%, you got to sacrifice oil. Okay. Mm-hmm. If you're snacking on nuts all day, not that nuts are bad, but you can't overdo it if you're trying to get at a 15% fat percentage a day. So it sounds very dogmatic, but this is what I see work. When people start telling me, man, it's not working for me, Bertus, and I tell them, well, are you tracking your fat intake? No. All right. Can you do that for me for the next few weeks? Okay. And once they do that, the sugars are normalized, regardless of what type of fruit they're eating.
So what are your priority fats? Or do you even focus on fats? Because it sounds like, keep your fats low. If you're not trying to eat any fat, then you're not going to eat fat.
Yeah, and that's what people don't realize. There's fat in everything. Even the fruit has obviously a small percentage, right, of fat. So that's what I love about this diet, this lifestyle. Let me say that, whole food, plant-based lifestyle, is that you don't need to really worry about, okay, where am I going to get my protein from, my carbs, it's going to come naturally in the whole foods you're eating. Mm-hmm. So if you're now, if you are worried about, getting people talk about the importance of omega-3s, right? So I would say a tablespoon of flaxseed is a great way to make sure you're getting your omega-3 portion. Just that's it. Flaxseed is what I always push. But in general, no, it's not something that you would have to worry about, because you're going to get, if you do track your fat, if you use like apps like, I'm just saying around Chronometer, or Lose It, there's apps that you could see what your macro breakdown is, and you'd be surprised, like you're hitting all the macros, even when you're trying to eliminate the higher fat, first off, eliminating animal foods, that's going to be the easiest way to get rid of fat, because the main source of fat in American diet is the meat, dairy, eggs, and cheese. That's the main food. Once you start getting rid of those, then okay, well maybe we'll have to look at how much avocados we eat, how much nuts, those, and oils. First, I would say oils before. Not that you can't eat avocados at all, but you're gonna have to limit the avocados and the nuts. The only way you're gonna know how you're doing is if you're tracking. And what's beautiful is you're gonna find a lot of people say, "Man, I can't eat anything." Nope. You're gonna be surprised how much food you're eating now that you're not worried about carbs. Because think about what the main source of food is when you look in a garden or a grocery store, in a produce aisle. Now imagine you could eat carbs without limit. You're gonna eat. There's a lot of foods now you can eat. You can have a very colorful plate, as long as you keep that, keep in mind your fat intake.
And what do you say to people that say, well, it's so expensive to eat healthy?
Oh yeah, I love that question. I've actually experimented with that. I said, well, is it really though? I mean, there's definitely things you could do to make it cheap, less expensive, right? Buying fruit in season, buying in bulk, things like that. But some of the cheapest foods, number one, are some of the healthiest foods are the cheapest foods. But how much is a bag of brown rice? Or a can of beans? Dirt cheap. A sack of sweet potatoes, right? You're talking, I mean, I've actually gone to the store and had a whole week of meals for literally, and people don't believe me. I have a YouTube video on it, and this is just for myself. I was cooking for myself. $20 food for the week.
And what
obviously,
decade
it was very basic.
Was this?
Huh? Was that?
Yeah. What decade was this?
Right? What decade? This was last year, but it was very basic, basically I was eating tacos every day. So it was basically, taco, a burrito bowl, so I just had potatoes, beans, some lettuce, but just to show you that, you especially, when you're choosing, certain food items, it's plant-based, whole food, plant-based, or eating healthy. That's an excuse, man. You could eat cheap.
Yeah.
You could eat cheap, but beyond that, I actually did an experiment with a colleague of mine. So she has about the same family size as I do. And we went to the store together. I said, you buy what you typically buy for your family. I buy what I typically buy for my family. Guess whose receipt was lower?
Obviously, it was you.
Right, obviously, I wouldn't be bragging. And we looked at each other's carts and we said, so what do you think is the differences? When you start eating healthy, what you're doing now is you're eliminating a lot of the low-calorie, energy-poor foods from your diet. Let go of the chips and the junk food and the pastries and the juices and the boxed, cereals that you go through in 2 days, right? You're saving a lot of money when you're eating whole foods, because whole foods, they fill you up longer, right? These other foods that are calorie rich and low in fiber are going to go through your body like water, and you're going to be back in the store again buying another box cereal. So something simple like switching from box cereals to oatmeal, man, you could save money. You're going to save money.
Yeah. Yeah, the reason I asked the decade was when I moved to New York from Pittsburgh in, I think it was like 1988. I took a job up there that they were paying me far less than I needed to actually survive in New York. And I my food budget for the week was about $25. And I tell my students, I was able to survive in New York on that.
Wow.
But I
88
always
though.
said, of course, that was 30 years ago.
Yeah.
But now I could say, okay, well, Lewis here, he did it a year ago, or 2 years ago.
Yeah. So it's
We
possible.
can do it now.
I mean, I'm not saying that it's going to be like, standard. Obviously, that was just an experiment. But yeah, just try it. Unfortunately, a lot of us, man, if I'm going to be real, we will, and this is the mind thing right here, right? The mind will do, I always tell my people, you have another part of you, right? It's not the best part of you, but it's a part of you, right? Call your alter ego, your id versus, but it's going to self-sabotage. It's going to convince you that you can't do this, that it's going to come up with every reason to survive and not die, right? It's the flesh versus the spirit, as we call as Christians, right? That flesh is real. The spirit is willing. Well, that flesh is weak. And it'll find any excuse to sabotage you. You got to learn how to quiet it and listen to the higher power, right? The frontal lobe, not the, the flesh.
And that's how we go back to our spies. The spiritual and the physical have to be intertwined. The mind and the body have to be together.
So
they got to be on the same page.
So connected, yeah.
But it is, you can eat really cheap. You have to put a little effort into it. You're not going to be able to have prepared foods or things that are going to take you 15 minutes in a microwave, fewer minutes in a microwave to be able to produce. But beans are super cheap.
Yeah, super cheap.
It's like you can live on beans, even
every
canned
day.
Beans. All that is relatively cheap. Yeah.
I would say this too, Jeff. I know the other problem that I hear a lot of people say is that, that when they think about eating this way, they're like, oh man, like that takes the fun out of food. But I always ask people, are you seasoning your vegetables? Like, I don't know why people think that they have to eat vegetables without seasoning. The same way you season your meat, season your vegetables. That right there could be a game changer for a lot of people. Like, I never thought of that, right? Take some jackfruit or something like that, and you season that up right. That thing tastes like barbecue chicken, right? Take your mushrooms and season like you would do meat, right? So mushrooms, beans, there are those things that kind of have a texture profile, at least close to meat, that when you season them, there's plenty of foods that you could meals you put together. I've tricked people and think they were eating meat, right? You take some tofu, you let that thing sit in some soy sauce for a while, and then put the right seasoning on there, and slap that, grill that, man. You would think you're eating meat, see, that's one thing too, just eating cheap and healthy, right? Or trying to eat less expensive and healthy. Spices are cheap. Spice up your food, man. Spice up your life, and you'll be more consistent for sure.
So what about too, like fresh versus frozen, canned, and do you have any recommendations on that, or does it matter that much until you really get the most refined?
Yeah. So organic versus not organic. I hear a lot of that too. I think whatever you can do consistently is most important. Whether you're talking about time or finances, whatever you can do well consistently, stick with that. If all you can do is do canned and frozen, then do that. Obviously fresh is going to be better, but there's a lot of foods, like there's nothing wrong with frozen vegetables. You can still get all the nutrients you need sufficient for your needs in the frozen produce aisle. So it's okay to. Is it better to cook your beans? Yeah, but you don't want to you don't want to take the time. You don't have the time. Then get canned, right? I try to get BPA free. Try to get one without the additives. Try what I like. Well, the most important thing is to look at the back and try to get as least added ingredients as possible. Try to stick with products that don't just have what and not anything else. But even then, right? Even then, that should not be, because one thing too. People don't realize that when you talk about like environmental pollutants. So I've read studies that I think they estimate about 90% of environmental pollutants end up in animal foods, not plants. The source of environmental pollutants, are animal products. Vast majority, by far, are coming from those. So just by eliminating those, right? Yeah, okay. If you can't afford to get organic, then that's okay. You're doing great in eliminating 90% of environmental pollutants right off the bat when you turn plant-based.
Right. So what about societal connection and kind of just emotional fitness? We talk about as being pillars of aging well. How important is it for your patients that are trying to reverse chronic disease to have strong social support networks, both by their healthcare system and in their personal lives?
I think it's a make or break it. It'll make or break your commitment. Going alone, unless you have a lot of grit, a lot of determination, is very hard, right? Without having somebody keeping you on task or rooting for you at least, because it always comes down to, I always say it's you first, is you and God. It's between you, all right, and whatever you believe is a higher power, right? That's it. That's all you have. But sometimes that gets really hard. It gets really lonely. There's that food noise, the toxic food environment we're around us that pulls us out of our commitments. So what keeps us from falling backwards, right, from our commitments, is having people behind us to say, hey, keep going, man. Keep going. Keep going. So many people who failed in their commitments would have succeeded if they had somebody, even if it was just one person, that told them at one time, no, you can do this. Right? Keep going. So that's why I encourage, take advantage of the internet. Right, Facebook groups. There's so many groups that are supportive online. Depending on where you are, there's community meetups. Right, maybe there's just look for a group that's walking or exercising together. Joining a gym. That's why I encourage getting a gym, not just exercising at home. Then you have people that are expecting you to be there. Weeks pass and like, hey, Lewis, you haven't been in the gym in a while. Where you been, man? And I know there's people looking for me. So we're social creatures, Jeff. You would agree that we're social creatures. Yeah. The more social we can be about whatever that commitment is, the more likely you're going to stick with it and enjoy it. It's going to be pleasurable, right? Not painful.
Yeah, and I imagine it really needs to be a familial change if you're going to live a lifestyle that's going to be more plant-based and reversing diabetes. You can't come home to a family that is eating a bag of chips and you're trying to eat kale chips.
Yeah, it's I say for sure that's one unfortunately a fallback, because you can't, especially when it comes to spouses. Like kids, you can influence a little better, but if they're really against changing, it's crazy. It's crazy the things that spouses will do to sabotage. I don't get how one person starts to be healthy, sometimes the other going nah, is so committed to not changing that they start eating potato chips for breakfast. I don't know, but so committed. You can't change. You can only change what you can change, control what you can control. But if you can, involve the family, man, that's gonna be huge. Don't do this just for yourself, and figure out how you can incorporate more meals for the family that are healthier, and they'll be grateful for it, obviously.
So for the listeners who may be newly diagnosed with type 2 diabetes or pre-diabetes, what are the first steps you encourage them to take if they want to pursue a path toward reversal?
Okay, very, very good question. So if they're newly diagnosed or pre-diabetic, first off, know that there's hope. This is not a death sentence. I would say that this right here, knowing, could be the best thing that happens to you, because a lot of times people go through life not knowing what's going on in their body, that they're sick. They don't even know they're sick until they get a stroke or a heart attack. Diabetes is like a warning sign. It's almost like a flashing gauge that says, hey, something's wrong. So take it as good news, right? Say, okay, wow, I didn't know. Thank you for letting me know. This is the time to change. Early on in the disease is the best time to change. Because if you delay it, which most people do, it only gets worse, and it gets worse fast. So I do want to scare you a little bit. Right? I want to encourage you and scare you a little bit. Encourage you that, yes, this is great news. To act now. If you delay, you're going to harm yourself even more, and you're going to need to do more to get out of it. So people who are early on diabetic, a lot of times there's small changes they need to make. Sometimes it's just stop eating cheese and the sugars came down and the A1C went back to normal, right? So there's actually a lot less involvement in change, but whatever change you're making, do it consistently and do it now. For sure.
And what are your recommendations in regards to things like sleep and exercise, physical activity?
Yeah, so all of it, do all of it. So sleep, as far as hours, so studies are saying 7 to 8 hours is ideal. And so, how many of us are getting at least 7? That's hard, but at least shoot for 7 hours of sleep consistently every day. And then as far as physical activity goes, I would say I want you to do a mixture of resistance training and cardio. So not all or only one or the other. So a lot of times people stick with the cardio and they forget the importance of building lean muscle mass, especially as we age. If you want to age well, the only thing that's going to keep your bones healthy and strong through age is impact resistance training. That's something I encourage people to do at least 2 to 3 times a week on a regular basis.
And so finally, when you think about the concept of aging well, what does that mean to you And how has your work in diabetes management shaped your approach to living a long and vibrant life?
So I think it's a lot more than numbers. Like I reaching 100, but how you feel and how interconnected you are with others at that age. And when you make the right decisions health wise, right, you age well because you're going to be more likely, I always say by the grace of God, right? None of us can add a hair to our head, but by God's grace, you're going to be thinking clearly, right? You're going to be well enough to walk, and get from A to B without pain. If you make decisions now, you're going to age well, right? You're going to age well and not just living long, but feeling good in that old age and being able to do the things you want to do, connect with others. Don't sacrifice your future. Don't trade your future for now, for the pleasures of now. It's not going to be worth it.
And now the question I ask of all my guests, and you look like you're pretty fit. So what are you doing personally to age well?
Oh, yeah. So I love the gym for sure. Of course, first diet, number one, I stick with the whole food plant-based diet. So I have eliminated animal foods from my diet. And I'm sticking with, the 5 groups I mentioned, and which shocks a lot of people because, like, how do you gain muscle without meat or protein, animal protein or protein shakes? You don't need it. And I was surprised when I learned that a few years ago. I was still gaining in the gym. So I work out about 5 days a week, mainly resistance training. I do some cardio as well. So I do have a series of exercises. If anyone's interested, I can send them to. But yeah, exercising regularly, eating healthy, practicing mindfulness. I know a lot of people talk mindfulness today, the importance of being still and enjoying the present moment. I struggle with that. I work on it every day, like, because I always like to worry. I'm a worry bee, but I like to worry. But focusing on the present, enjoying and realizing that, I got this.
So is there anything we missed talking about today? Well, I got a question. What would your daily diet look like? What do you get up, have in the morning? What's your favorite meals?
So my favorite meals, that's good. That's a good question. I love oatmeal. Overnight oats is really convenient for me too, especially flavoring it up with all fruits I can get my hands on. Usually some berries, blueberries, strawberries, bananas, cinnamon. I like to sprinkle flaxseed in there too. So it's a pretty rich oatmeal. When I'm talking about oatmeal, it's rich. It's heavy. I love tofu. So I like to do it scrambled. Sometimes I get the super firm blocks and I slice it and eat it like a sandwich, As far as bread, I try to limit bread use, but if I am, I'll try to stick with either Ezekiel or Dave's Killer Bread. I love Dave's Killer
both
Bread.
Of those.
Yeah. Let's see what else. Of course, burrito bowls. I love burrito bowls, bean-based, of course, instead of meat. I like to keep it simple. Salads of all kind. I dress up my salad. People look at my salad, and it's pretty rich. Yeah. I don't think what else do I like to eat. I do avoid mock meats. I try to avoid those, but once in a while, on occasions, I'll enjoy maybe a little Possible burger. I'm splurging. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So. And that's what's nice is that as long as you're consistent too on a daily basis, you could splurge once in a while with some veggie meats. I used to be eating those like all the time every day, but now they're more of an occasional basis. It's our jackfruit's another thing I like. Mushrooms, jackfruit. I once in a while because it's hard to get consistently. But mushrooms. I'm actually going today to Asian market so I can load up on some mushrooms. And you cook the mushroom up right, you think it's meat. Right? It's really good. Yeah. Yeah. So that's about it. I mean, I could probably talk some more if I think about all I eat. I try to experiment a lot too because I want to show people, how being whole food plant-based, there's so many options out there. There's so many food that you can learn to enjoy. I mean, literally, if you wanted to, you could probably be adding something new every week to your diet. I should say this too. So since I'm Haitian, I love rice. I would say my favorite meal for sure is coming home to rice and beans, man. It's something simple, man. Like every Haitian out there will concur, man. There's nothing as comforting as a nice warm plate of rice and beans. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. You see the cultures that live on rice and beans, and what separates them is the spices and the seasonings that they use.
Oh, I mean, yeah. If you don't like rice and beans, you haven't had Haitian rice and beans yet. That's the problem. Yeah, seasoning. That's what it is. And same thing, apply that same principle to everything you're eating, man. See, why only season meat? Why can't you season everything else? Season. I remember going, I don't know how much time you got, but I remember I was at a medieval festival, and they do really good. They have a really good plant-based option, right? They season their vegetables really good. The next day I go to another show, a pirate dinner show, and they have a vegetarian option, and they gave me bland vegetables. Like, there was no seasoning. A little packet of salt. Like, here, you guess you could add. Like, why did they think I was offended. Why did they think vegetarians don't like seasoning? Like, you don't think we like our food to taste good? Like, I was offended. Like, but season your vegetables, man. Yeah.
I like the idea of the flaxseed. I started putting that in our coffee. We make that in the morning. I just put probably a couple tablespoons in there and brew that through the coffee, so we're getting a little bit more of those omega-3s. And then I add it to my oatmeal. I also started, my wife, for some recipe she was using, she brought home hemp seed. It's high in the omegas. And so I've been putting that in my oatmeal, and then I've started adding now chia seeds. And really sturdying up that oatmeal. I mean, that's kind of my start meal of the day.
If you're going to do anything, like I would say oatmeal is like so key, right? I feel bad for those who don't like it, man, but you could season it. I mean, I've never had savory. I've had savory oatmeal. You could change how you taste it. Yeah. A friend of mine said, he makes savory oatmeal. But yeah, if you don't like oatmeal, try a different flavor or ingredients on top.
Yeah, that food budget when I lived in New York was primarily a lot of oatmeal and a lot of whole grain brown rice, and just I'd take to work just this big canister of rice. I did eat eggs. I don't know where you're at with the eggs, because that's again a plant-based protein, but I would a few hard-boiled eggs in there, and then carrots were a cheap vegetable. Now I didn't have probably enough variety in there, and I could have done a much better job. But I was single and fast-paced life. I didn't have a lot of time for stuff, but I had time to cook rice at the beginning of the week. I had time to cook up a big pot of beans. So it's just a matter of planning some time to cook up these things that you can eat throughout the week.
And just do the best you can, man. Do the best you can. Treat yourself with grace. I always like to tell people, Jeff, health is a journey. It's not a destination. So we're all learning along the way and getting better. As long as you're progressing, you're on the right track.
So where can our listeners connect with you? I see your Diabetes 180 Degrees behind you.
180 Degrees. Diabetes 180. Looking up my name in that will probably find me online pretty easily on across all social platforms. So Diabetes 180. My specific website is just my name. I keep it simple, lewisbertus.com.
And anything else we missed today?
Man, we covered a lot.
I think we did, yeah.
Yeah, you're a very good interviewer, man. You know how to touch all the important points, man. I think we talked about everything that we can or should talk about. So I'm impressed. We did good, I think.
I'm sure there's a lot more we can talk about. So we'll have you back on here sometime in the future again, just to kind of dive into this a little bit deeper. Because 6 months from now, we might need a reminder that we need to change our diets again. So
and I also like to encourage two people, Jeff. I don't know if you wanted to give people like a freebie. I always like to give people recipes, somewhere to start. So I do have a collection. We could probably give a link maybe in the show notes or something.
Yeah, we'll put that in the show notes, and I want to see that. I want some
over 250 I've collected. Over 250 recipes, all low fat, whole food, plant based, and so you can start off without having to think about it. Just look.
That's awesome. And I need to cut down on my meat quite a bit. And I have a daughter who won't eat meat, and we're trying to get her just eating more protein, eating less. Crappy food. So I'm going to have her go through the 250 recipes. Pick out the stuff you want to try. Let's get you eating healthy.
Look at me as an example. You can still gain muscle without the meat. You can.
You're looking good. So you're making me feel. Of course, I'm a lot older than you, so I have a little bit of an excuse. But
no excuses.
Right.
But health is a journey. We're all learning and getting better along the way.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you being on the journey with us. Just keep doing what you're doing and keep aging well.
Yes, I will. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you for listening. I hope you benefited from today's podcast. And until next time, keep aging well.